So that is the main players in tonight's talk. You've all seen Who Do You Think You Are? So you have 5 generations of people there in the 5 rows. Where there's a little equals between 2, that means they're married. So if you take the middle 2, David is married to Anne Elizabeth Barrett. Then you come down, they had 3 children, Anne, Walter, David and Oliver. And those 3 children in turn had 3 more sets of children. So there's 3 lots of cousins on the bottom. The Renoufs, the Le Boutilliers, the 4 in the middle, the young ladies, and the 2 at the end. The story really starts in 1967, when a fresh-faced young graduate from McGill University in Montreal, named Barry Le Boutillier, wrote to my father, who lived in Chingford in London at that time, inquiring whether indeed they were related. Now in those days it was not fashionable to research a family tree, so it came as a great surprise this chap had written. We weren't related, we're still not related, but 40 years later we're still friends, and that fresh-faced young student is now a retired guy with a beard, but we still communicate. At the same time as he wrote to my father, he wrote to some people in his local telephone directory as well, which is where he found my father in the London telephone directory, which was in the Montreal library. And he lived at the bottom of the hill in Montreal, quite a nice area. But at the top of the hill, Mount Royal, or more Le Boutilliers, quite a posh family. And he wrote to the family there, which comprised 3 spinster ladies. They're in the bottom row of that first chart. Olive Bernice, Belina Anne, and Ruby Vivian. You'll notice there's a 4th child there who died in infancy. In due course, he wrote to these 3 ladies, they did not reply. He forgot all about it, and in due course these ladies, one after the other, reached elderly stage and died. And the last lady died in 1986, which was Ruby, the youngest daughter. As they had no descendants, it fell upon a neighbour to go and clear their effects, and he was stuck with all this stuff. What does he do with it? Where's the nearest skip? But he, by just sheer luck, found the letter that Barry had written 20 years earlier. Thought, well, that's interesting. Put 2 and 2 together. Thought, I'll get all the bits of paper in this house, stuff them in a carrier bag, and drop them round to that guy. He can sort them out. Which is what he did. But Barry, by that time, had emigrated. He'd come to England, and he still is in England. But luckily his mother still lived at the same address, and although she was elderly, she took care of, did carry the bag in and put it in a cupboard, waiting for her son, dutiful son, to come and make the next visit, which he did. But she forgot to give him the bag, and this went on for a few years, until one day she said, oh, I've got a bag in the cupboard that some guy dropped in. Well, Barry already had his luggage, to have this half hundredweight of papers in the carrier bag to bring back as well, he was not too pleased. But they did finish up back in England. They made the journey across the Atlantic in a carrier bag. He brought them home, put them in his cupboard. By that time he'd gone off doing family history on the Le Boutillier side, and he was doing his mother's side, which was a different surname. So they remained in his cupboard until one day it suddenly dawned on him, on one of his visits, he'd bring them over to me. Let me sort them out. So I finished up in my cupboard. And there they stayed for quite a while, until one day I was clearing the cupboard out and an envelope fell out of the carrier bag. It was this envelope. The interesting thing is, to me, how these have been made. It's stiff parchment, so I don't want to damage it. The guy has cut an 1/8-inch strip off the bottom, almost to the edge, and that becomes the bootlace. That piece of parchment becomes the strip for tying it up. He then snipped a 1/2-inch strip halfway across and made the label for putting the details on. And then the whole lot folds up and becomes one package. tied up, which is fascinating. In the second row or so down, it has Sovereign Sir Jacques, by the grace of God, King of England. Okay, so, come on, when was James the First? No, when did he reign?
1603.
Yeah, I knew you'd come up with it.
About 1620s, I recall.
1603 to 1625, pretty close, okay? That was a contract of some sort on property. And the next one is a letter from Nicholas Coutances to Jean Hamon regarding an enclosure of land, a plot of land. You can see the date on this one, 1737. This one's a little clearer to read. Sovereign Sir Georges II, par la grâce de Dieu, roi de la Grande-Bretagne, France and Ireland. So we were spreading our empire to France and Ireland by that time. His dates, Charles?
It says here 1727 to 1760.
You've got that one right as well. The next one, again, is a different sort of document. It's on paper, it's quite a flimsy affair, so I won't take it out of its packet. It's only on paper. And it's a legal guardianship. The interesting thing about this one, which I nearly fell off my chair when I noticed it yesterday, it's a young lady called Suzanne Poindexter, and she made a mark on the 27e jour d'octobre 1711. That's the 27th of October 1711. 300 years to the day, that young lady signed that piece of paper. And I spotted that last night. That is absolutely incredible to me. There it is, 27th day, the Oct, I've abbreviated that, 1711. And then there are different editions on the document. And in fact, it is a guardianship. Tuteur would be the masculine, tutrice is the feminine. And on the reverse, they've done different editions as the time has gone by. The situation would be that some children were left orphaned or whatever, and the law in Jersey is such that if the father dies, the eldest son automatically inherits the main property. The other children inherit the bits and pieces of property around. And then there's an almighty scramble for the guy who owns the big bit to buy all the other bits off his brothers and sisters so that the property comes back together again. But if the children are under 21, then they need a guardian. And in this case, the guardian was, it says up here, Suzanne Poindexter, tutrice des enfants de tout Monsieur Jean Poindexter. She was guardian of the children of the dead John Poindexter. It wouldn't be her husband, probably was her brother. If it had been her husband, her surname would not be Poindexter. Ladies in Jersey do not adopt their husband's surname. They keep their own maiden name through life and are referred to as Janice Brown, wife of so-and-so, widow of so-and-so. Very similar to they do in America, where they put the maiden name in the middle of the Christian names, which totally confuses everybody. So I suspect that she was indeed his sister. I love the signature. Thomas Steve Ray has signed it. It's got this lovely scroll here, which he does, and I think it says Rector. It looks like Rector, so somebody of authority who could write has done it for her. She's signed it. That's not her signature. There's her S and there's her P. She's done her mark. So that really, it concludes what was in that envelope. It amazed me what was in there. What their link is to the story I'm going to tell you, I'm not quite sure. But those documents were in Canada, in the possession of these three ladies. They come from Jersey. The family originated from Jersey. They're obviously to do with the family a generation or two before the main story starts. But you wanted to go back 4 centuries, and these took you back. There was one more. That one. Don't ask me what it is. I can't even identify the writing. I can't find anything out about it at all. I don't know if it's Latin or whether it's French, except I think that one word there is Poindexter, which means it may be the same family as Suzanne Poindexter, who was the guardian. Other than that, I cannot tell you a thing about it. It's illegible to me. I'll do my best with it, I can't make it. But on the other side, remarkably, it says 1389. Is there a reference number, the date? It's not in the same hand as the main document. And here, faintly, was the original writing. And all that brown staining is because the guy before me didn't wear his white gloves. It's a shame, but these documents do get ruined by constant handling. If that's 1389, that is really old, but I cannot tell you how old it is. So the story really starts, coming back to our chart, which you have in front of you, with a David Le Boutillier. And the wording there, which you probably won't read, says, David, son of Mr. Philip Le Boutillier, Jr., and Madame Elizabeth de la Cour. So, and that is David's baptism certificate, signed by the rector. So for some reason, probably later in his career he needed to prove his approximate age. He had to get his baptism recorded by the local rector, and that was it. So that document gives us 2 generations back, you'll notice. We've got his father as Philip, and he was in fact Philip Jr., so the chap before him was another Philip, so you've gone back 3 generations on that. That's dated 1825, so you're probably back to about 1750 with those other Philips. We've got nothing on David's youth. Okay, all this came out of this bag, nothing else. But we do know that he went to sea. There's his mariner's register ticket. The date is on it, 1847, is just here, 1847. He was mate by this time, so he'd been to sea for a little while, and he was age 22 then, so he'd been to sea for 3 or 4 years, one assumes. It was issued in Liverpool, and we have his description: 5 feet, fair complexion, brown hair, blue eyes. He progressed quite quickly, and on the 25th of January 1855, he gained his master's certificate, so he could become captain of a ship. That's the front of the document, and that is the back. It confirms his date of birth up there as 1825, which may be the reason he wanted that certificate from his parson. And he took that exam in London, although it was issued in the port of Jersey down here. He had a funny handshake. He joined St John's Lodge at Plymouth. Now, there's a St John's in Jersey. So whether it's St John's in Jersey comes under the Plymouth hierarchy, I'm not quite sure, or whether there's a St John's in Plymouth, I can't tell you. But that was sealed and signed in January 1859. Captain David spent 30 years at sea. By the tonnage of these ships, I'd say they were all sailing vessels. They ranged from in the 100 tons, 400 tons is the biggest. The top one, this is not an official form, it's used a signals form for writing these on. That's why it's crossed out there. The top one, the Adventurer, Captain Le Boutillier, his first voyage, 10 years in this. I can't believe that, but can't imagine his mum sending him off with the sandwiches and see you in 10 years' time. Whether it means 10 years on that ferry, I don't know. But Captain Le Boutillier, undoubtedly, was his elder brother John. That didn't come out of the bag, I know that from other research. He was 10 or so years his senior, and I've no doubt he went on his elder brother's ship for his first voyage. All of the captains there have got Jersey names: LeGrayly, Fowler, Hennell, Balash, Pinell, and then by the time we get down to here, the captain is D. Le Boutillier. And if you remember, 1855 was the year he gained his master's certificate. He gained his master's certificate, said, off you go lad, you're going to Brazil. And he took his first trip as captain to Brazil, having done Gaspé Peninsula in Canada, Foreign, coast of Africa, Mediterranean, Galatz, Brazil, and then China. And he captained the ship to China. promised you several continents, didn't I? 4 continents. We're now in Asia. And this is the China trip that he's mentioned as his last trip on that previous document. And this is a copy of a letter, presumably his copy. It didn't have carbon paper, so they must have written it all out twice, because this was in the bag with the rest of the stuff. Written to his agent in China. So how this guy's going to get the letter any quicker than his boat, I'm not quite sure. It's saying he's picked up a load. It's only worth £1.80 a tonne. You can do about 1,100 tonnes. You'll pay 7.5% commission, 2.5% at port of discharge. So all the details of the trip and your obedience servant, etc., etc. So he was in Hong Kong loading, I think it was General Goods it's called, cargo general, etc. So he's loading a cargo on a ship called Milton in Hong Kong. Note the date, October 1870. By March 1871, he arrives with that ship in New York. That's nearly 6 months later. And again writes to his agent in Jersey, accounting for some of the money. He sent him £500 and then the £293. He sent nearly £800 from New York for the account of the ship John Milton, which was the ship he was captain of. It's surprising, but he did have the time to marry, and he married Anne Elizabeth Barrett. That's, I'm sure, a photograph of a painting of the lady. So it shows his son, eldest son, Walter David, aged 10 at that time, and his wife, and they were from St John's, Jersey. And he lived at Valley House, which is a name that comes up once or twice. It was an oil painting, 18 by 24. Conveniently gives us the age of David approximately. He must have been born about 1859. There were more children, but there's not much about their childhood. But there was a lad called Oliver, and he did that postcard-sized painting, which was in the bag, presumably one of his dad's ships. And that's all we have of his childhood. It must have been difficulty raising a family when you were at sea. But he did his best, and he sent little notes to the boys, which they kept, usually of a religious nature. I like this one here. Do not take advice of the bad boys, it says. But by 1889, the tables were reversed. He was probably at home, and the boys had flown the nest. So you have a letter to a son far away from home, another little religious note. It presumably is Walter, the eldest son, but Oliver had also left home by that time. And Oliver was in Shippagan. Shippagan?
Never heard of it.
Never heard of Shippagan? New Brunswick, Canada. And he wrote to his mother in fluent French. Jersey is a French-speaking country. All those letters I've shown you up to now have been in fluent English. It's totally puzzled me why this happens. Part of the reason is that the Jersey language is Jerry's, it's a spoken language, it is not a written language. There is no written Jersey language. So they had to adopt classic French or English. If they were posh people, they learned English and French. All their official documents were done in posh French. And as you saw with Suzanne Poindexter, all she could do was sign her initials on some document that somebody else had prepared for her in fluent French. So there, it looks good French to me. So Oliver spoke good French. Perhaps his mother favoured French. Perhaps his mother didn't know English. Perhaps she only, because she wrote back to, in this case, Walter, again in French. So his mother preferred French. That's dated 27th of December 1896. And there were numerous letters in the bag, backwards and forwards on family matters. But all good things come to an end. Sadly, Captain David's wife, Anne Barrett, and I notice she's Anne Barrett, maiden name, died, aged 73 years, in Jersey on February the 2nd, 1897. And this is how Canada got the news. 11 words on a cable. So the youngsters up the back, a cable is a text message, but it comes on a piece of paper and then delivers it on a bike. 11 words. Mother died noon, father is the message. Here's a letter from Captain David to his son Walter, black-edged as you would imagine, telling him all about the funeral arrangements, thanking Walter for some substantial money he sent, which he'd been to St Mary's Post Office in Jersey, and he got a good rate of exchange for it. So Walter was very generous to his father. He talks about Nina. Pierre says, I shall write to dear Nina next time. Nina is the abbreviation or pet name for Belina, his wife. She was always called Nina. Know how neat the handwriting is for an elderly man, and that's March 1897. And by October, that's how the writing has deteriorated. But I've been taken worse of late, and Dr. Blampier do what he can for me, also Edward and Annie, Annie was his daughter. I'm old and wore out. I may last only a few days. Then not a nice description of his illness, how he was coughing himself to death, his lungs were choking and the pipe was full. In case we should telegraph you. It took 12 words that time, and it was 2 days after that it was written. Father died 10, sister. You all right down there? The kid's still proud though. That's 10 foot tall. That's the tombstone they had. The obelisk monument to be made of red Jersey granite, all through, finely axed column and inscription block with one side of the block to be polished for the inscription. And a poem and then erected by their children. You remember that Susan Poindexter? Well, here it is, working. Father had died, the property bequeathed to the eldest son. The eldest son got the main house, which was Valley House. But Oliver, which is signed by Oliver, we've got La Vieille Maison d'Amos, the old house of Amos, which adjoined Valley House. And he sold it back to his brother for a consideration of $200 in 1899. So the estate's coming back together again. And this is a map. I've managed to get a section of the map. It was too big to do in one section. And there is Valley House we talked about. It says the old house of Amos, and here is the Clost Amos, which is the enclosure of Amos. There's the former Cotilles d'Amos, which is, the Cotilles is a small field on a slope, typical of those Jersey ones where they grow your Jersey Royals. Very difficult to farm, but they're called Cotilles. And that was the former Cotilles of Amos, but there's no mention of the house of Amos. So whether it's this bit here, or that bit, or the one over the road, I'm not quite sure. But that map, presumably, was drawn up at the same time as that property transaction was taking place. That really is the end of that generation of Cotilliers. That's James Powell. That was the father of Lena, or Belina. I think that again is a photo of a portrait. It doesn't look like a genuine photo to me. I know he was a Scotsman, as will be revealed later. And I imagine him as a quietly spoken, genteel man. But that's the only thing I know about him for certain. But one thing we can be sure of, he never argued with his wife. In genealogy, you learn more about people when they're dead than when they're alive, which is a fact of life. James Powell died at an advanced age of 75. That makes me pass myself like that. And a lot of you're all laughing at me. And he doesn't say what he did, but his son was obviously quite prominent because his son was Great Northwest Telegraph Company. he gets more of a mention than his father. His wife survived him by 17 years, and we learn from that he came from Lübeck in Germany. The significance of me is that all of this is now taking place in Winnipeg. This is W. Le Boutillier, Walter's wife, of Winnipeg. They started in Montreal, and they're now in Winnipeg. She was a blonde. So that's 100-year-old hair. All in the bag. There was obviously some concern over the family plot. They had a plot at Mount Royal Cemetery, which was obviously quite crowded by that time. And somebody wrote to the cemetery authority and said, how much space have we got left in our plot? They wrote back and said, yes, you've got the graves marked X, so you're the only ones that can be used. There's the plot. And we have 3 graves here marked X. 1, 2, 3. Depth 4'2", 4'6", 4'6". Depth you can't use 3'4", 3'4". They're going to get you in about a foot's worth by the sound of it. So, and, that Mrs. Powell was quite a portly lady. I was wondering if she would have fitted okay. That didn't go down too well with whoever made the inquiry because it rumbled on for a while. And in due course they demanded a list of everybody that was in this plot, because it couldn't really be full. And the genealogist dreamed, look, every burial for 100 years. I can't believe it. All in this 200 square foot plot. And that was in 1930. There's one more there buried in 1931, penned on the bottom, another one in 1940. There's only one space left. It's a bit of a race to see who can get it. That is the plot. It's on the slope because it's at the top of the hill. It's got Hodgson, which is one of the families they married into, but Powell here, which is the name that we want here. Anyway, back to Nina. Nothing again of her childhood, but by the time she was 18, she was confirmed at St Bartholomew's Reformed Episcopal Church. She clearly met Walter by then, because she had a sister Ruth, as you'll see on the chart. Ruth had an autograph album, and by 1882 she'd managed to get Walter David Le Boutillier to sign it for her, and indeed a few years later Oliver signed it. So the family were aware of Walter by 1882. The confirmation had been in 1883. And the romance clearly blossomed, because by the 8th of August 1883 he was sending sweet little notes to her, darling Nina. I send my photo herewith enclosed for your acceptance. Please treat it as your own. 2 little rings that the guy there's bashing out, he's got Walter and Nina on the 2 rings. It's good that he's got that bush behind him, he doesn't seem to be wearing much more than that penny, does he? They were in the bag unidentified. I like to think one of those is the Walter photograph that he sent to her. That one had been pinned up on the wall somewhere. I think probably he is Walter. Sorry?
They're the same person.
I think they're probably the same person, yes. They were taken in Jersey, the photographer's name is on the back. And I can date them fairly accurately at about that time by the number of the negatives, because my family went to the same photographer. We dated our photographs and the negative numbers were very similar. So he did about 3,000 photos a year. A negative number on the back. You can learn a lot from simple things like that. But clearly by this time, the Powell family were getting concerned. This upstart from Jersey had arrived over there, wooing their daughter, trying to get hold of the Powell millions. And when he got to, he wanted to marry her. Well, they weren't having that unless there was a prenup, as the Americans say, and they set up a marriage contract. What's hers is hers, and what's yours is yours. That's the title page for it. It was filed at 3 o'clock on the 4th of June 1886. If anybody wants to take an example of it. So that's it, that's the full. It ran into several pages, and indeed they to add insult to injury, poor old Walter got the bill. He had to pay for it as well. Costing $6 and $4.30 for stamps, etc. That's $10.30. They're knocked off at 13, costing $10. Took him 6 months to pay it. That's to swallow hard before he paid it. And the marriage was 2 or 3 days later. That's the marriage announcement. It took place at St Bartholomew's. That's where she was confirmed. For some reason, Walter needed a copy of his birth certificate, so he had to write to Jersey and get his father David to confirm his birth. So that's a birth rather than a baptism in this case. On the 30th of February 1859. Clearly the reason he wanted it was he needed to take out some life insurance and he needed proof of age. Soon the children came along. The child born on the 18th of March there at the Bertillier was Paulina Anne, and the little Bertillier born a fortnight earlier was Oliver's daughter, Myra. So they were cousins only a fortnight apart. Later on, Ruby was born on the 24th of April 1898. I can't find Olive's birth recorded at all. There was one daughter who died in infancy. On the back it said Little Edna's grave with a bottle of flowers on it. Okay, total change of scene. Another continent. Grenfell. Where's Grenfell? There's a clue in the title.
Australia.
You're right, it's Australia, not South Africa. It's New South Wales. And it's a letter from George Le Bertillier, who is the uncle of Walter, brother of David on your charts, out of the blue. Not such good English as the others, quite some awful spelling, but it's in English, and he's gone to enormous efforts. If you couldn't think how to spell a word, he put every letter in he thought might be in it. Over down all the letters. I've been sinking a shaft for gold, 90 feet deep, but got nothing, very near got smothered in it. It fell in, so we left it. I've got a little farm, 40 acres, 5 miles from here, plenty of fruit, there's a bad year for fruit this year. And here, so I'm doing some work at my trade building. The thing I find poignant about it is that here's a letter from George Le Bertillier to his nephew Walter in Canada. He's never met him and never going to meet him. And then he writes him a lovely letter and give my regards to your dear little family, etc., etc. And there were several letters between the two of them. Around the 1910s, the family clearly moved west. And as I say, they were in Winnipeg by the time Nina's mother died. They moved to Winnipeg, and here they are joining the Augustine Presbyterian Church. And in fact, Ruby was baptised there in 1913. Here they clearly prospered. The family car. I'm no car expert. Any ideas? It must be around 1910, 1915. There's a better view of it, I should say. But I don't suppose there were many cars around in Canada at that time. Do you think? They could afford to send the family away down south to Arizona for Christmas. Papa stayed behind with one daughter. Mother went presumably with the other 2 daughters. And there's a Nina looking quite well off to me, followed by Walter, again looking quite rich. I wonder what the lady was doing here. I thought she was doing the ironing at first, because she's got a dog in her hands there. Well, can't quite think where she featured that picture. This was about the time of World War I, as you can imagine. And Annie, the sister, who remained in Jersey and looked after David in his last days, had to write a letter saying that her son Edward had been wounded. And she wrote a nice letter, and they didn't know the details at all. It had taken a while for them to hear it. The interesting bit was that it was from the Canadian authorities. He was with the Canadian forces, which implies that Edward had also emigrated to Canada, probably sponsored by his uncle Walter, and when the call-up came, he joined the Canadian Forces. Only a few days later, sadly, he died of his wounds. On PS for the letter, he gave his brother John's address for them to write to, and he was again in the Canadian Command Depot, Shoreham-by-Sea, Sussex. So both boys were in the Canadian Forces, although their parents had stayed in Jersey. They didn't fare a lot better in World War II. The Renoufs again suffered. Mr. Edward Renouf is in need of financial assistance. He wishes to inform the Inquirer that all the family is well and sends love to all. April 1841, we had a few more years of occupation to survive from then onwards, because that was quite early days of the occupation of Jersey. And that's addressed, it should be addressed to Miss Parr, it's addressed to Mrs. In due course, I'm afraid, Walter David died. Quite young, he was 60 years, 11 months. He was clearly a man of some standing by that time, as we've seen from his cars and etc. And he got reported in as many as 9 newspapers. So he died away on business. He was manager of a firm called Mark Fisher Sons and Company. I've looked them up on the internet, they were clothing suppliers to tailors and that sort of thing. Here's his memorial stone. It must have been put up in about 1964. That's not a mistake. Paulina made 100, just. So the stone was obviously erected when she died. The church expressed their sympathy, but in such formal tones. It's really, I can't get used to the idea that it'd be such a formal thing. They had a meeting of the board to write a sympathy letter. And there's the actual minutes, you know, of the letter. That the members of the session of Augustine Church in regular meeting place do record their sins. It's also formal. It is further resolved that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to Mrs. Matilda. In due course, Oliver died, which is the younger son. He died in America. He only got one write-up, and the write-up more concerned his son than it did him. And it says in there, Captain Oliver Letellier was an ace of the Royal Flying Corps during World War I, that would be. My wife and I met him many years ago in Las Vegas. American cowboy hat. I looked down to see if he got spurs on. He really was a character. He came with all his photograph albums of me with the stars, and he spent his whole career flying, stunt flying mainly for films, skywriting, and he made his money telling the story of how the Red Baron got shot down. He was in the dogfight when the Red Baron got shot down in World War I, and he made controversy of it. Did the Australians shoot him down from the ground, or was he shot down from the air by one in the dogfight? And he kept that story running till his death, with people paying to put it in magazines year after year after year. I tried to find a portrait of each of Walter's sons. There were thousands of photos in there, along with the phone bills, electric bills, and all the other bits and pieces. I found a nice portrait of Olive, the eldest daughter. Alina, I couldn't find it posed by herself, but they used to spend a lot of holidays in the Canadian Rockies and liked that area. And Ruby Vivian, all attractive girls, none married. They were courting during the period of World War I. One never knows if they had boyfriends and lost them and decided to remain single. But there's a family of 3 girls, never married, and so there's no descendants really to carry on. Well, that almost brings you to the end, except I hope I've expressed to you that family history, and this was called a family history meeting, is more than just names and dates and births and marriages. There is a story behind all of these people, and I hope you think that that is an interesting collection. And it took me ages to put it all together from what was in the bag. But somebody somewhere will one day come along and say, I'm related to that. Well, go on, have it, please. Ruby was quite a good artist, and these were her parents. The camera was called the flash on that when she did the photograph on her father. But and Ruby was the last to survive. And I've just remembered I sent back a bus pass for cancellation. Thank you very much.
Alan, on behalf of all present, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for a very interesting talk. All our sort of research family history, which we had to carry away in so much detail. I mean, I only got pirates and like that. Fine sometimes. And I would like everybody to show their appreciation